I used to think I was good at reading a room. Military teaches you that scan the edges, find the exit clock, the silence before it turns sharp. But there are some rooms where silence isn't a warning. It's an answer. The driveway was already full when I turned onto the street. A rented valet stand sat crooked at the foot of the Whitlow gate, manned by a boy in a navy blazer too big for his shoulders. He didn't look up when I passed him. I parked 3 houses down across from the Connors' old place. Their wind chime still hung crooked, missing one silver pipe. I sat for a while, engine off, watching the shadows of dresses and suit jackets drift behind the windows. Someone had brought string lights, cheap ones, warm-coloured, strung too low. One bulb had already burned out. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. 3 years stationed between Mosul and Landstuhl had taught me not to announce myself unless someone needed something signed or identified. Still, I'd thought showing up might mean something. A quiet kind of gesture. At the side gate, I could smell grilled meat and sandalwood candles. A jazz band was tucked behind the fountain, soft horns and practiced smiles. I recognized a few cousins. Erin from the army got a few polite nods from across the yard. None of them walked over. I glanced toward the main table. Name cards printed in cream and gold. My eyes skimmed quickly twice. Richard, Margaret, Tyler, Caroline, even Josh, the second cousin who once gave me a rubber band for Christmas. There was no Erin. The voice behind me arrived like it always did, measured too kind. You should have called ahead. She wore pearls, real ones, the kind Laura kept in her velvet drawer, the one I wasn't allowed to touch after she died. Margaret's hair was done tight, lip colour neat, not a smudge out of place. I didn't want to interrupt anything I said. Margaret smiled like someone pulling a tight thread. It's just a small gathering. Family, mostly. It's been a hard year, you know. I looked past her into the hallway. The sideboard where Mom used to keep the blue vase had been replaced with a mirror. New wood floors, framed photos of Tyler's wedding and Dad's retirement. Someone had moved the wall clock. I couldn't see myself in the mirror, just the glare from the porch light. Does Dad know I'm here? I'm sure he would have loved to see you. But there's a lot going on. Her voice dipped lower. You understand? I nodded. I didn't. Inside, a waiter brushed past carrying shrimp on ice. Tyler's voice rang from the kitchen, something about stocks. Caroline laughed. A cousin snapped a photo near the staircase where my boots once left mud that Laura wiped away without a word. I stepped backward onto the stone path. My hand brushed the brass door frame as I moved, steadying myself like it still belonged to me. It didn't. Just text next time, Margaret said softly, almost kindly. So we can prepare. I didn't answer. I just turned. The valet didn't look up when I walked past him again. He was scrolling something on his phone legs, crossed, chewing a mint. At the gas station on Highway 17, I bought a lukewarm coffee and a pack of peanuts. The clerk handed me change without meeting my eyes. I drove in silence to the motel off Old Farm Road, same place I stayed during officer selection years ago. Room 12. The AC still clicked twice before settling. The same spot of rust on the mirror. The lamp flickered once when I turned it on. I sat on the bed boots off, but uniform still on, and stared at the tiny folder I'd taken from the side table in the hall when no one was looking. It wasn't theft. Not really. It had been half-tucked beneath an ad for patio renovations. Property filings, not meant for me. On page 3, transfer of ownership, 428 Wilcox Ave, Whitlow Family Trust, Whitlow, LLC Richard, Tyler. No mention of Laura. No record of me. I didn't feel anything at first. Not loss, not betrayal, just an odd emptiness, like walking into a room and forgetting what you came for. I stared at the paper until the letters bled into each other. My name had once lived on this deed. Laura had handwritten it into her estate draft. To Erin, the house with the blue door. I'd memorized that line the year I deployed. Now, the blue door was painted black. In the morning, someone would power wash the driveway and restock the champagne. Margaret would wash her pearls and fold her shawl. Dad might wonder aloud whether the beef had been too rare. Tyler would update the family group chat. No one would mention the woman in uniform who stood at the gate. I unzipped my duffel, pulled out the green notebook I kept tucked between old ID tags and letters I never mailed. The corners were bent from heat and time. The cover had a faint coffee ring from Germany Hospital Cafe, bitter and always 2 days old. I opened to a fresh page. The pen took a moment to wake up, then 3 words plain and unadorned. I'm not on the list. I didn't underline them, didn't circle or date. I just closed the book, placed it back where it belonged, and turned off the light. The room held still. Nothing asked to be explained. There's a kind of quiet you learn to carry, so it doesn't rattle when you walk. The corner table in the cafe faced the window. I didn't choose it for the view, but because it was out of the line of traffic. The coffee had gone cold. I kept drinking it anyway. The sleeve on the cup had a stain shaped like a thumbprint mine, probably. I ran my finger over it without thinking. In the field, we called that muscle memory. Back home, it just looked like hesitation. My phone buzzed once. A name I recognized. A name I didn't save. We didn't expect you. This is Tyler's event. I placed the phone face down. No vibration. No sound. Just a small black rectangle carrying its meaning 1,000 miles wide. There was a time I would have answered. Not to argue, just to explain. Something about flight times or not wanting to be a distraction. I used to think explanations softened things. I used to think a lot of things. When I was 19, I memorized everyone's birthdays. I bought cards in advance, lined them up in my desk drawer with sticky notes for reminders. Tyler liked basketball, so his had a cartoon hoop and a lame pun. Richard's were always plain embossed neutral. He never commented on them, but I kept sending them. Every year. The year I entered West Point, I wrote my name on the dry erase board in the kitchen before I left. Next to the date's April 15th report day. Lucille wiped it clean before the weekend ended. Said it made the kitchen feel cluttered. I ironed my own uniform in the guest room. Laura had taught me to press without leaving shine. I kept that habit even now. You can help with dinner or set the table. Just don't make a thing of it. That was how Lucille phrased it the first time I came back on leave. The placemats were already set when I arrived. Tyler had a seat between our father and her. I stood near the counter waiting for a cue. Eventually, I pulled out a chair for myself, end of the table, corner closest to the hallway. No one looked up. They served salmon that night. I don't eat fish. I ate it anyway. Later, I wiped down the sink while the others watched a game in the living room. I folded the kitchen towel into thirds. Laura had always done it in halves, but Lucille changed the drawer system. Said the halves were too bulky. When I received my first commendation, I printed a copy and slipped it under the front door with the mail. I didn't want a celebration, just acknowledgement. The next time I visited, it was sitting on the side table, folded in half beneath a takeout menu. Richard poured a glass of iced tea and said, "Good. Now, try not to get injured next time." I remember nodding. I think I smiled. It felt like enough. It had to. Once, after a deployment, I brought back a bracelet for Lucille, woven by a local woman in Iraq. Dark threads, subtle pattern, not flashy. I thought it might suit her. She turned it over in her hand, then placed it beside the napkins. I'll keep it somewhere safe. This house doesn't really do accessories. She never wore it. Tyler got a new car the same week. There was a barbecue in the backyard, balloons, a banner. Richard grilled. Lucille took photos. I held the lemonade pitcher until my wrist ached. No one asked where I'd been the last 6 months. I didn't blame them. Not then. He's just not expressive. That's what I told myself after every short answer, every sideways glance, every party where my name wasn't in the toast. I chalked it up to culture, military restraint, southern manners, generational gaps. When Tyler was accepted to graduate school, Lucille framed the acceptance letter. It sat on the mantel for months. My West Point commission sat in my sock drawer. I didn't want to wrinkle it. Once I tried asking Richard what he remembered about Laura's laugh. I don't know why I brought it up. Maybe the radio played something that reminded me of her. He didn't look up from his newspaper. She kept it in check. Didn't like being loud. Then he turned the page. I stopped asking after that. The jacket I wore that day in the cafe was fraying along the cuffs. Not military issue, just old. The left sleeve had a barely visible thread from the day I caught it on a nail in a refugee tent. I kept meaning to fix it. I never did. There were days I tried to tell stories, little ones, a joke from training, a mistake I'd made in Germany. I could tell within the first 10 seconds whether I'd lost the room. Tyler checked his phone. Lucille cleared the dishes. Richard looked out the window. "You make things sound dramatic," Lucille said once. "I think you just don't know how to rest." She handed me a stack of linens to fold, said it helped her unwind. I folded them in silence. When I was 10, Laura gave me a journal with a leather strap and a tiny key. I used to write notes to her in it after she passed. Just fragments. What I ate, what Tyler said at school, whether Richard had smiled that day. The key rusted when I left it in the laundry once. I never threw it away. I still carry it, not to write in it. Just to remember that I once thought being seen was a matter of being useful. The waiter refilled my cup without asking. I nodded barely. The coffee was hotter than expected. I let it cool. I flipped the phone over again. No new messages. The screen still lit with the last one. "We didn't expect you." This is Tyler's event. I used to reread texts like that, trying to find the part where I'd misunderstood the tone. This time, I didn't. I folded the napkin in half, placed it over the rim of my cup, and pushed the phone to the edge of the table. There was nothing else to reply. Not this time. Some silences aren't meant to be broken. Some just tell you exactly where you stand. Sometimes it's the spaces between people that tell you everything. The hard drive clicked when I opened it, like it had to clear its throat. The casing had a scratch across the top from when I dropped it boarding a C-17. I always meant to replace it. I never did. It was the last thing I'd backed up before leaving for Mosul. Not because I thought it would matter, but because someone told me it might. The folders were named by year. Inside each subfolder's named by holiday event nickname. There was one called Erin's Visit, March. I clicked it. 12 photos, none of me, a cake, a family friend holding a baby, Tyler in a blazer holding a drink, Richard standing near the grill. I remembered that trip. I brought a bottle of wine from Germany, expensive enough to be polite. No one opened it. It sat on the kitchen counter for 2 days before disappearing. In one photo, the dining room light is too bright, casting a yellow hue over everyone's faces. In the background, a black duffel bag leans against the coat rack. mine, cropped out in the next shot. I opened a different folder, Tyler and Caro wedding, 216 files. I clicked through until I reached a wide shot of the reception hall. I found myself by accident, far left edge, half-turned a serving tray, partially blocking my torso. I was wearing the navy dress Lucille picked. She said it was safely neutral. I wore boots underneath. No one noticed. Someone had posted an album from that day on social media. The caption read, "Everyone who matters. A perfect day." I didn't react. The comment section had hearts and clapping emojis. I kept scrolling. The Whitlow family Christmas card from last year showed up in an alumni newsletter. I hadn't subscribed, but someone forwarded it. The photo had been taken near the oak tree in the backyard. Richard, Lucille, Tyler, Caroline. Matching scarves. I recognized the dog Tyler's rescue. His name was Scout. He barked at me once, and they joked he had good instincts. The card read, "Wishing you love from all of us, the Whitlow family." I had sent a package that year. Not expensive. Just socks and a puzzle and a handwritten note. No one mentioned receiving it. Maybe it got lost. Maybe it didn't. A video appeared on the homepage when I logged into the alumni portal highlight reel from West Point's 20th anniversary gala. Tyler's face filled the screen briefly. He gave a speech. The caption under his name read, "Tyler Whitlow, Consultant, Whitlow, Strategic Group." Lucille appeared beside him, holding a glass of wine. She leaned in as the camera passed. Her voice clipped, but clear. "Well, Tyler's always been the achiever of the family. I didn't appear in the footage." I closed the tab. I remembered the first time I won something. It was 5th grade, a national science competition. STEM before it was a buzzword. I came home holding a certificate in a plastic frame. Laura took a photo on the porch. She made orange juice that day and let me drink it from a wine glass. Richard stood in the doorway reading the mail. Tyler had just made the state team for basketball. Richard didn't ask about the certificate. He placed a hand on Tyler's shoulder. Now that's something worth showing off. I kept the frame in my closet for years. I didn't hang it. The wall already had too many holes. The last time I stood in the living room of that house, the wall behind the piano held a new arrangement. 3 portraits professionally taken mounted on linen mat. One of them featured Richard and Lucille, seated hands gently touching. The second, Tyler and Caroline, outdoors autumn leaves, curated just so. The third, Tyler alone, arms crossed, casual grin. His degree framed beside it. There was no space left. I traced the edge of a frame once when no one was looking. The glass had been wiped clean. No dust. When I asked about the missing wedding photo, the one Laura used to keep near the bookshelf, Lucille didn't pause. It didn't match the new frames. She handed me a stack of dish towels after that, like nothing had been said. I remembered the old bookshelf, the one Laura let me organize by color, not alphabet. She said it made no sense, but it made me happy. After she passed, Lucille rearranged it, donated half the titles, replaced the others with decorative objects, a ceramic bird, an empty hourglass. I found the hourglass once lying on its side. The sand had already settled. The hallway used to have a gallery wall. Tyler and I, first day of school. Laura holding me at the fairgrounds. A picture of the 4 of us, stiff but smiling. Lucille said the arrangement looked dated. She painted the wall a muted grey and hung a mirror instead. "You're in there," she said once, gesturing toward it. It wasn't meant as kindness. That night, I sat in the guest room staring at a row of hooks by the door. One had a denim jacket with Tyler's initials stitched inside. Mine had been gone for years. I used to hang it next to Laura's raincoat. The hooks looked too clean, like no one had touched them in a while. I don't know when I stopped appearing in photos. Maybe it wasn't a choice. Maybe it was a slow fading, like a watermark too faint to notice until it's gone. There's a difference between being cropped out and never being framed at all. I closed the laptop and let my hand rest on the lid. It was warm beneath my palm. The room was still. Nothing moved. I didn't scroll further. I didn't search for my name. I didn't re-watch the video. I just sat there quietly, aware of the weight of a memory no longer shared. People think things disappear in loud ways, fire, theft, scandal. But sometimes what's taken is done in ink. I didn't plan to stop at the records office. The detour wasn't on the itinerary, and how my rental car's GPS hadn't been updated in years. Still, I pulled into the lot, parked between two trucks with faded campaign stickers, and sat for a moment, staring at the building. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed like they'd been trying to quit for weeks. The tile floor had that familiar municipal grey, the one that never quite gets clean. A sign on the wall read, "Public Records, Title Division," in letters starting to peel. A woman at the front counter wore a name tag that said Bev. Her nails were short and neat, like she typed a lot, but didn't care much for polish. I handed her a slip of paper with the address. "You're looking for the deed." I nodded. She typed with 2 fingers, slow but sure. Then she tilted the screen toward me. The title was transferred 3 years ago. There was a will dispute, then a quiet claim deed. Looks like ownership's under a limited liability company now. Whitlow Strategic Holdings LLC. She pointed to a PDF. 2 names listed. Richard Whitlow and Tyler Whitlow. Joint managing partners. She clicked again. Your name doesn't show on the chain. It was removed in the revision. I asked nothing. She printed the documents, stapled them twice, and handed them across the counter. Looks like it's all been finalized. Filed under Act 14B, clean transfer, no contest filed afterward. She paused. You weren't notified I folded the papers once then. Again, sharp edges lined up. She didn't wait for an answer. When I stepped back outside, the air tasted like old rain and something tinny. I put the papers in my bag. The zipper caught. The last time I saw the original will, I was still in uniform. Laura had folded it into thirds and placed it inside a copy of Leaves of Grass. The page corner marked, "Oh, me, oh life." She never explained the choice. She didn't need to. The will was simple. She left the house to me. Not because I asked, not because I was owed, just because she knew I'd need something solid when the ground gave out. Rachel Green was still listed in my contacts under legal. Estate. I hadn't called her in 6 years. When she picked up, her voice hadn't aged. You're not calling about a re-enlistment clause, are you? I didn't answer. She filled the silence. What's the matter, Erin? I told her the bare version, the printed pages, the LLC, the absence. Do you want to fight? No, not yet. She waited. I just want to understand how they erased me so cleanly. Her tone changed. That house was your mother's. There'd have to be formal override, consent, or silence. I said nothing. Rachel sighed. Send me the paperwork. I'll walk it through. But if they filed under strategic trust protections, this wasn't a mistake. I ended the call. Back at the hotel, I laid the papers out flat on the dresser. 4 pages. Legal font. Section headers. Notarized signature at the bottom, R. Whitlow. Then a second T. Whitlow. The clause that struck hardest wasn't the one listing their ownership. It was the line that nullified prior allocations in the event of contestation, non-compliance, or lapse in continuity of familial designation. That phrase kept turning in my head. Lapse in continuity of familial designation. I read it again, and again. My name wasn't removed because I rejected them. It was removed because they decided I no longer belonged. There was no call. No email. No sit-down meeting in the parlor with folded hands and pre-typed bullet points. No message from Richard. No heads-up from Tyler. No carefully worded explanation from Lucille. Just a removal so precise it didn't leave residue. 3 years. I tried to remember what I was doing when they filed the change. I was stationed in Bavaria. 14-hour shifts, pre-dawn drills, cold that climbed into your jaw. I had received a birthday card that year with no return address. It had a printed message, no signature. I remembered thinking at least someone remembered the date. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the seam in the carpet. The house had a back door that always stuck unless you lifted the handle first. Laura never fixed it. She used to joke that a door that made you work was harder to slam. I once came home on leave and brought her a kitchen clock from Seoul. It was shaped like a teapot and made a soft chime every hour. Richard called it kitschy. It disappeared a week later. The file folder on the dresser reflected the soft yellow light from the lamp. A corner had started to curl. Laura had a habit of underlining things in books, then writing yes in the margins. I kept waiting for some mark, an annotation, a hesitation, a trace of someone else's hand. There was none. The papers were too clean. I touched the signature line, traced the ink with my thumb. It had been done with intent. Not out of oversight, not from neglect. A house isn't just walls. It's the last place someone called your name like it mattered. I folded the documents again. This time, not carefully. I didn't place them back in my bag. I left them on the desk edges uneven. I sat still, listening to the faint hum of the mini fridge, the tick of a wall clock that didn't belong to anyone. It wasn't anger. It wasn't loss. It was the stillness after a choice has been made by someone else on your behalf without your voice, and all that's left is recognizing the silence that came before it. I used to think silence was something passive, what's left when you've run out of words. I no longer think that's true. They called my name second, not first, not last, just enough in the middle to be forgettable. I stood, walked exactly 9 steps to the front, paused, accepted the pin with a nod, and turned back. My dress uniform held no creases, my shoes no dust. The applause was brief, polite, practiced. No one in the audience stood for me. No one held a camera toward the stage. That used to sting more than it does now. Afterwards, someone asked if I wanted a photo. I declined. I already knew how it would look, shoulders squared ribbon, glinting eyes steady, and a space behind me where a family should have stood. I drove myself back from the base, took the long way through neighborhoods with porches and forgotten Halloween decorations still clinging to shrubs. I stopped at a light where an old man crossed the street too slowly and didn't look up once. At the apartment, I emptied my pockets one by one. The invitation with the emblem, a receipt from a cafe no one goes to twice, a folded paper napkin I used to wipe lipstick from my teeth. The last thing I placed on the table was the photograph, wallet-sized, edges softened. A younger version of my father uniform, pressed hands behind his back, expression carved in stone. I'd kept it for years. I don't know why. Maybe because I thought if I carried the version of him I admired, It might shelter me from the version that looked through me. I opened the drawer beside the couch and placed the photo inside. Not out of anger. I didn't tear it. I didn't burn it. I just stopped needing it. Later that night, my phone buzzed once. Tyler. His name appeared without a preview, just a grey block. I opened it. Heard you were in town. You should have asked before showing up at Dad's event. There was no punctuation, just the plainness of control disguised as protocol. I read it twice, maybe 3 times. I didn't respond. I tapped on his name, held it down, and selected Remove Contact. The phone didn't ask why. The next day, Margaret called. I let it ring once before answering. I didn't say hello. Erin, she began. I think you know by now this hasn't been easy for any of us. I didn't speak. We all have our places, she continued, as if assigning chairs around a table I was no longer invited to. Maybe yours was meant to be somewhere else. I could hear her adjusting something on her end, a bracelet perhaps clinking lightly against a glass. I agree. I hung up. The following morning, I sat at the table with a blank email draft open on the screen. The subject line wrote itself. Termination of shared trust. Participation. Erin Whitlow. I didn't use legal jargon or passive voice. I didn't mention fairness. I didn't ask for anything. I simply stated I would no longer be part of the residual family trust, effective immediately. I waived interest in remaining furniture accounts or liquidations. I asked for no reply. Before sending, I reread the final line. Let them have the furniture. I'm keeping the silence. That stayed. There's an old ring I wear sometimes, one Laura left tucked inside an envelope with no note. The stone is missing, the band thinned, but it never rusts. I turned it on my finger as I watched the message send. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel anything that needed to be named, just the quiet satisfaction of choosing not to enter a room when the door was already closed. I boiled water and made tea I didn't drink. The cup sat untouched until it went cold. That felt fitting. Silence, I've learned, isn't the absence of a fight. It's the refusal to play the part they've written for you. And that was the day I chose mine. I didn't realize how loud my life had been until I heard nothing but the hum of a mini fridge and the faint rattle of pipes behind thin walls. The apartment sat above a bakery that closed before sunset, and an antique shop where the same porcelain dog had been in the window since the day I signed the lease. There was one window facing south, a bed that didn't creak when I turned over, and a chipped porcelain kettle with a faint crack through the handle. I boiled water in it every morning, not because the tea mattered, but because the steam rising from it made the silence seem. I unpacked slowly. 2 duffel bags and 1 storage box marked medals not important. I placed the box under the bed unopened. The map went up on the wall opposite the door, not a glossy poster, but a folded field map from the first tour. It still smelled faintly of sand and pencil graphite. I didn't hang it to remember a war. I hung it because no one there had ever asked me to explain myself. Survival was enough. The first email I wrote wasn't for a job. It was a grant inquiry for a non-profit I hadn't fully outlined yet. Something for women who'd served and returned to kitchens, courtrooms, waiting rooms carrying parts of the field no one else could see. I didn't know if the form would be read. That wasn't the point. I started keeping lists again, not of groceries or chores, but of sentences I wanted to say out loud one day. Things like, I'm not difficult. No, I won't tone it down. Silence doesn't mean absence. I emailed 3 organizations about a possible partnership. I deleted one before sending rewrote the second twice, and sent the third without rereading. I didn't check for replies that day. I just needed to move the weight from inside my ribs to the outside of the screen. One afternoon, I received a forwarded legal document from a notary in Charleston, a formal notice confirming the finalization of the trust redistribution. There was a small note attached, unsigned. This concludes all pending matters related to your claim. Wishing you clarity in your future. I printed it out, folded it, placed it under the base of a flower vase I'd bought for $6 at the shop downstairs. That night, I picked up a small bouquet of white roses, not for any occasion, not to decorate, just because the petals looked clean and I wanted something to soften the edges of the metal table. I trimmed the stems with a pair of old scissors, placed them in the vase and stepped back. One petal detached almost immediately, curling inward as it fell. I didn't bend to retrieve it. Later, someone from the bakery knocked on the ceiling below with a broom handle twice, a soft reminder the building was old, sound traveled. I paused the faucet, let the quiet settle again. I didn't miss the house in Charleston. What I missed were the spaces I thought were mine. The kitchen drawer where I used to keep my own measuring spoons, the left side of the porch swing. A hallway light switch I used without thinking, but memory and ownership aren't the same. Lucille once told me during a family dinner that I didn't bring much softness to a room. Her fork hadn't paused between bites. She meant it as a reflection, not a complaint. I didn't respond then. I don't remember touching my food afterward. Tyler once left a voicemail years ago after I earned a commendation. The only part I kept was this: you know, some people get ahead by force, others just fit in better. He didn't mean it as an insult. That was what made it worse. In Austin, no one knew my name unless I gave it. The woman at the post office called me ma'am, with the same tone she used for the man ahead of me, mailing cigars. I liked that. Some mornings, I walked 1 extra block past my usual route, just to stand under a particular tree that had no leaves, only dried seed pods that rattled softly when the wind moved through. No one else seemed to notice the sound. That made it feel like mine. There was a grey sweater I started wearing in the evenings, faded at the elbows with a loose cuff that hung lower on one side. It had belonged to my mother. She used to wear it while reading in the den. I kept it because the fabric smelled faintly like the lavender sachets she once tucked in drawers. The scent was almost gone now. That felt right, too. By the end of the week, I stopped checking my phone for names I no longer stored. There were no voicemails, only a software update reminder, and one automated call from a charity asking for donations in someone else's name. I put my hand around the cup of tea and felt the heat settle into my palm. It didn't matter if I drank it. The warmth was enough. The room was quiet, not because nothing was happening, but because, for once, I didn't need to be heard to exist, and when the second rose petal fell quietly, gently, I let it lie where it landed. Familiar voices feel different when they arrive too late. The phone lit up at 6:42 p.m., just after I closed my laptop for the evening. The name on the screen hadn't changed. It still read Maggie, though everyone else called her Lucille now. I let it ring once, twice, then tapped decline. She followed with a text. Your speech was powerful. Perhaps we misjudged you. I read it twice. The ellipsis did more work than the word powerful. Below it came the second half. Would be nice if the family looked whole again. You know, for legacy. Legacy had never been my word. It was something people reached for when they didn't want to use photo op. A week earlier, I'd spoken at a small panel for female veterans, transitioning into civilian leadership. My segment was less than 10 minutes long, soft voice, plain suit, no slideshow. Someone recorded it on their phone and clipped a part where I said, "Returning doesn't mean going back." That moment made its way onto a veterans advocacy page. 10,000 views, 2 articles, a few kind emails from strangers. Not one of them asked if my family had come. I opened the voicemail from Tyler the next morning. There was no greeting. "I heard you were doing some impressive outreach." "That's good. Since we're all trying to be on better terms, maybe we can talk estate distribution. There's a parcel near Charleston tied to Mom's side. Could be worth revisiting. You know now that things are calming down." His voice never lost that careful tone, like reading from a script he didn't fully believe in. There was no mention of the speeches or of me, really. Just business. The same day, a reporter reached out to the Foundation email. She was compiling a piece on intergenerational military service and had spoken with Richard and Tyler. They'd painted a picture, 3 generations of service strength and resilience. She wanted to round it out with a woman's voice. I didn't reply right away. I reread the subject line twice, celebrating the Whitlow legacy. That word again. The next morning, I stood in front of my closet with one hanger in hand. The navy blazer I'd worn at Fort Sam still held its crease. I ran my fingers along the cuff, one thread loose, barely noticeable, unless you were looking. I didn't cut it. I just pressed it back into the seam. At lunch, I called the reporter. 5 minutes. Maybe 6. I thanked her. Declined politely. "I'm not the image you want," I said, "and I don't owe you symmetry." She was quiet for a second too long, then cleared her throat and ended the call. Later, I opened the drawer where I kept the small wooden box from my mother, inside the same folded card. To my forever daughter. Her handwriting had changed near the end, tighter, thinner. I had once traced the ink with my fingertip, trying to feel what she meant. Now, I just closed the lid. That evening, Lucille called again. This time, I answer. She spoke like someone practicing warmth, rounded vowels. Slow cadence. There was no apology. "People change, Erin. Families evolve. We don't always get it right at first." Then a pause. "Your brother, he's trying. He thinks it'd help if the family presented more united. For interviews, community features, these things matter whether we like it or not." I stood in the kitchen, looking at the half-drunk mug of tea on the counter. A faint ring had formed near the bottom where it had sat too long. "We never meant to exclude you," she said. "But not everyone fits into the same frame. That's not cruelty, it's clarity." Clarity. I could have replied. I could have asked about the years without calls, the decisions made behind doors I wasn't invited to knock on. But the silence did what words wouldn't. Before she hung up, she added, "It's never too late to return if you're willing to compromise." I didn't respond. Not then. Later that night, I went out to the balcony. The air was cool. A distant dog barked once, then quieted. Below, the lights in the bakery had gone out, but the scent of sugar still lingered faintly in the alley. I looked at my phone. 5 missed calls in the last 3 days. 2 from Maggie, 1 from Tyler, 1 unknown number, 1 from Rachel, the lawyer. Only the last one mattered. Rachel's voicemail had been short. A question, and then a line that stayed with me. "You don't need to explain silence. I didn't call back, not that night. Instead, I watered the rosemary by the railing. It had started growing sideways, leaning toward the only light it could find. I adjusted the pot just slightly, not to force it upright, but to give it room. Then I sat down, let my spine settle into the metal chair, and exhaled once. There was no heaviness left, just the sound of the city not needing anything from me, and that finally felt like mine. It's strange how quiet clarity sounds when it arrives without ceremony. The sandwich tasted like what it was, simple unprocessed made by my own hands. Whole grain turkey mustard and arugula I'd rinsed that morning in a chipped white colander I found at a second-hand shop. I ate it slowly at the edge of my shared desk, careful not to drop crumbs onto the folder marked Preliminary Grant Proposals. We work out of an old building near South Lamar, half office, half hopeful mess. My corner has a view of the wall across the alley. Ivy clings to brick like it has something to prove. Most mornings the younger engineers arrive first, coffee in hand, lanyards swinging. They nod when I walk in, but rarely speak unless it's about server issues or scheduling meetings. I like it that way. There's a corkboard behind my chair now. I hung it without meaning to use it much, but one square near the center holds a quote I wrote in permanent marker last month. You don't need to prove your pain to deserve peace. No one's asked about it yet. I hope they never do. A man named Everett stopped by that afternoon. He wore a blazer that still had the retail fold across the shoulder seam and handed me a pitch deck with too many slides and too few specifics. On page 9, he mentioned a foundation I recognized my father had once been on its board. We're interested in aligning with projects that reflect continuity. A narrative arc, if you will. I flipped the packet shut before he finished the sentence. Just because you know my father doesn't mean you know me. He blinked twice, then shifted in his seat. I didn't apologize for the interruption. I walked him out with practiced ease. My shoes didn't squeak against the floor. The door clicked shut behind him, and I watched his figure move past the window, shoulders slightly tighter than when he entered. A few hours later, Callie, one of our interns, looked up from her screen and wrinkled her nose. What's the point of doing this non-profit stuff anyway? Her tone wasn't cruel, just young. I handed her the stapler she couldn't find and met her eyes for half a second. So no one feels erased and still has to say thank you. She looked down after that. I didn't press. In the break room, the electric kettle sputtered. I poured water over the same black tea I've used for years. The string tore slightly when I pulled the bag out, and the corner of the paper tag curled inward. I didn't smooth it. I watched it shrink and darken at the edge of the mug. Back at my desk, an envelope had arrived, cream cardstock, thin, almost weightless. I slid my thumb under the flap and unfolded the notice inside. Lucille's house. Certificate of incorporation. Approved. No seal. No fanfare. Just a line of type in a language I now understand. Legal quiet. Final. I stared at the heading longer than necessary. The name had been my choice not for reconciliation, but for contrast. She had always preferred appearances. I preferred frameworks. Now, the name belonged to a structure built for women with no seat at any table, especially the ones where the silverware always pointed towards someone else's future. The room around me didn't change. The air didn't shift. But something in my spine did. I sat a little straighter, not taller, just steadier. At 4:18 p.m., an email arrived from Helen Brooks, a volunteer, also grant coordinator. I'd met twice and trusted more than most. No emojis, no exclamations, just a subject line. It begins. I didn't respond right away. I minimized the window and opened a spreadsheet. Colored tabs blinked back at me like a pulse. Numbers had always made sense in ways people rarely did. By 6, most of the team had packed up, backpacks slung over one shoulder, keyboards quiet. Someone left a granola bar on my desk, probably thinking I'd missed lunch again. I didn't correct them. Outside, dusk had settled in, and I sat a moment longer, my hand resting lightly on the edge of the corkboard. The texture pressed faint lines into my skin. I didn't pull away. The phone buzzed once on the desk, no name. Just a number with a Charleston area code. I turned the screen over without looking. This was no longer a day for them. This was no longer a life shaped around what they didn't say or said, too late. I had work to do, files to review. A small group of women waiting on confirmation of our first retreat site in San Marcos. They weren't asking for legacy. They were building something they could hand to each other without shame. I opened a new document and typed a name at the top. Not mine. Theirs. I didn't bold it. I didn't center it. I just began. Some returns don't require invitation, just completion. I walked through the entrance without pausing. No one looked directly at me, but several noticed. The hush wasn't immediate. It came gradually, like fog sinking into a field. I hadn't been to the house since the shutters were painted a lighter color. Someone had added hydrangeas along the walk. They didn't match the soil. The blazer fit too well. Tailored in a quiet charcoal, no insignia, no name tag. Just smooth fabric and a single inside pocket where the envelope rested creased once folded tight. I had held it long enough for the edge to soften. The seal wasn't licked, just tucked. I stepped around a woman holding a flute of champagne, past a child in patent leather shoes, dragging a ribbon across the hardwood. The music was recorded, piano meant to sound like memory. It didn't. Richard stood near the fireplace mid-conversation. His voice still had that slight rise at the end, as if everything he said required final approval. I didn't interrupt. I stood within arm's reach, waited for the pause between sentences, and held out the envelope. He took it automatically, like it might be a card. I didn't explain. I stepped back. 3 feet was enough. He opened it immediately right there without stepping aside. The movement of his hands was slower than it used to be. His lips tightened as he read. His eyes didn't lift until the second page. The hush settled then. One woman coughed. Another whispered, "What is it?" He didn't answer. Tyler appeared beside him, not out of concern, but calculation. "Is this a joke?" I kept my gaze level. "You can stay tonight," I said. "But the keys come to me tomorrow." No one laughed. No one raised a glass. A boy spilled punch near the stairs, and the stain widened slowly on the cream carpet. I turned before it reached my shoes. I didn't take another sip. I didn't glance toward the family portrait by the piano, the one where I used to be on the far left, cropped at the shoulder. They'd moved it since. No one followed me to the door. Outside, the air felt sharp, but not unkind. Back home, I placed my phone face down on the shelf. The screen had lit up twice during the drive, both from numbers I didn't save. I didn't read the messages. I didn't need. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the name change form I'd filled weeks earlier. Everything in ink. No corrections. At the bottom, I'd checked the box no publication requested. Just beneath it in the small space marked reason I'd written restoration. Not revenge. Not reconciliation. Just the return of something once held, then taken. The next morning, I filed it without ceremony. I didn't upload a photo, didn't sign with flourish, just initials. just time and date. At lunch, Helen from the grant board sent over a contract. I signed it between bites of sliced pear and sharp cheddar on a napkin with the word resilient printed in faint gold at the corner. I didn't choose the napkin. It came with the sandwich. Later, I rearranged the books on my shelf. One spine stuck out Operations Manual, 3rd Division Medical Unit. It still smelled faintly of old tape and desert sun. I didn't put it away. I left it, angled, unfinished. No one asked why I went to the party. No one needed to. An old voice played once in my head, not memory, but something quieter. You should have asked before showing up. Not this time. This time I showed up as the owner, not the daughter, not the soldier, not the liability they kept off balance. That night, a letter slid under my door. No stamp, no name. The handwriting was familiar in the way shadows are recognizable only when you don't try too hard. We didn't mean to hurt you. No signature. I folded it once then again. I didn't burn it. I didn't save it. I didn't let it speak louder than my silence. By dusk, the kitchen light flickered once before holding steady. I made tea with the last of the loose leaves in the blue tin. They'd gone dry. I let them steep too long. The bitterness suited the cup. I didn't sweeten it. Not everything has to be made palatable. I sipped slowly, staring at the return envelope that came with the deed confirmation. They always offer the option to rescind. I didn't need it. Some things once reclaimed don't need defending. I kept the paper. I let the envelope drift to the recycling bin. Not tossed, just released. And that was enough. There was no gate click, no morning horn, no clipboard waiting for my initials. I woke, without needing to. The air held stillness, not silence. I sat up slowly, not from pain, but from permission. The kind I once waited for in uniform in meetings in kitchens where someone else poured the coffee first. The teapot was already warm on the stove. I'd filled it last night and forgot. Laura's porcelain with the hairline crack near the spout. I never tried to fix it. I rinsed out yesterday's cup fingers, brushing the rim where a faint stain resisted even the rough side of the sponge. The floor creaked the same way it did when I was 9. Back then, I thought the sound meant something was wrong with the house. Now I think it just means it remembers. A soft rustling came from outside. Through the side window, I could see Missy bending over the soil, tugging weeds like threads. Danny was nearby, speaking softly to a new woman. I didn't catch the name. She was crouching beside the herb bed, hands stiff, waiting to be told she was doing it wrong. Danny didn't correct her, just reached over, turned the soil once, and nodded. At the corner of the kitchen, a small cake sat on the windowsill. Light yellow frosting. Piped in shaky letters. You don't have to be strong today. I didn't check who left it. It didn't matter. There's a corkboard now where the old gun case used to hang. A weekly schedule, pinned with color-coded slips, meal prep, porch sweeping, garden duty. It rotated evenly. No ranks, no exceptions. I added my name to Monday's slot for broom duty. No one noticed. That was the point. At breakfast, I found a handwritten letter tucked between the newspaper and the morning list of deliveries. Ink smudged at the corner as if someone held the pen too tightly. The return address read, El Paso, but the writing felt older, like it belonged to a hand that had once signed orders, then bills, then nothing for a long time. Dear Ms. Whitlow, I don't know if I qualify for this place. I'm not broken, but I'm tired of pretending not to be. I served in 96 and again in 2002, then came back to nothing. I sleep fine, but I don't rest. My daughter calls me only when she needs the car fixed. I've stopped fixing it. I'm not looking for healing. Just room. I folded it once, placed it inside the cedar box labeled "Keep Going." The lid closed without a sound. I didn't write back yet. Some letters need to sit beside your chest for a while before your hands know what to do. Outside, the sun touched only the east side of the house. The rest waited. I brought out the broom. The steps had collected leaves from the pecan tree, old ones still dry, curling inward like they'd gone cold in their sleep. I swept without hurrying. Each bristle pass felt like a sentence without punctuation. A truck drove by, slowed, then kept going. Lynn passed behind me, carrying a folded quilt, and said without stopping, "You don't look tired anymore." I didn't answer. I wasn't sure what tired looked like now. Back inside, a small radio near the pantry played a recording of someone reading poetry. A voice I didn't recognize spoke a line slowly. Sometimes the victory is in not having to raise your voice. It didn't feel like a quote, more like something the house believed. In the hallway above the thermostat hangs a photo Laura, arms around a girl in overalls with dirt on her face. No flag, no ribbons, just two people who weren't looking at the camera. Beneath it, a brass plate reads, "Built not from inheritance, but from endurance." I dusted the frame with the edge of my sleeve. Later that afternoon, someone knocked once, barely enough to hear. I opened the screen door to find a woman I hadn't met. Maybe mid-40s. Her shirt was too clean for someone who'd been walking, but her shoes had the slouch of long roads. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't ask. She sat on the lowest step like someone who didn't want to take up space. I brought her a cup, plain ceramic, chipped at the handle. I handed it to her without looking too long, then said, quietly, "Sit. You're safe." She nodded once. Neither of us spoke for a while. The tea cooled between us. Behind me, the screen door clicked back into place. I leaned the broom against the rail, not upright, just gently resting, like it would wait until morning. The sky above us turned softer without announcing it. And in that stillness, nothing had to be earned. Not comfort, not breath, not the right to exist gently. I stayed on the porch until the sun slipped behind the shed. The woman hadn't moved. The cup rested on her knee, untouched, but not refused. When I finally stood, I didn't explain where I was going. She didn't ask. I left the door slightly open. That was enough.